Hi guys, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, it's 𝗙𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗃. Thank you for coming. As always, for the subscribers, thank you so much for the love, the support I've really received this year. I really appreciate it. And I would like to send you happy holidays. I know people are up and down for the celebrations. So yeah, I just want to send you love. And well, in today's video, this is something that happened a few weeks back, and also people were tagging me in it, but I do have a different experience or a different take on it. But yeah, first watch this clip, come back, and yeah, let's talk about it.
So I just finished watching this video of this woman making food for Thanksgiving, and she was talking about the history of Black Americans and Thanksgiving. And she was talking about how Thanksgiving was one of the first holidays that people who were enslaved were allowed to celebrate. And like many Americans, specifically white Americans who learned about slavery, I'm realizing that my education around the entire topic and history is so skewed and flawed. And the amount of things that I've learned just by following Black creators on TikTok is more than I've ever learned in school. So then I started thinking about the conversations that I had with my parents about slavery when I started learning about it in school. And then it got me thinking, how do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children? Is it a conversation that's like you sit down and you lay everything out? Is it like something that you slowly reveal more information about because it's obviously a very traumatic topic? Or for anybody out there, was it something that your parents even talked to you about, or was it something that was like, oh, learned it in school? This is a 100% genuine question, and I just want to learn the differences of how Black families teach about slavery versus white families.
Growing up, I didn't really get the information about slavery from my parents. I got it from my grandparents. My parents really didn't have the conversation with me. I mostly had that talk with my grandparents. I was blessed in the fact that I not only got to meet my great-grandmother, but my great-great-grandmother. My great-great-grandmother, her stories were mostly passed down through my grandfather. So if I had a question about slavery that I was learning in school, I could just go to him and he would give me all the details. Not the graphic details, because he would clean it up because I was a child, but he's got his point across. One of the stories I do remember is him telling me about them splitting up families. It's one of the reasons why my family is super close-knit, and we don't really go a day without talking to one another. My great-grandmother, her family were sharecroppers as well. So she would tell me stories about the exploitation of her family post-slavery. I remember she told me a story about her being a little girl and some white man assaulted her mother, and her father defended her mom, and they had to move in the middle of the night. I remember her telling me how scared she was, and that's always stuck with me. This is why I think it's really important to actually talk to your grandparents and get their story while they still can give it to you.
How do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
Some of them don't. Mine didn't. I had to learn about racism through experiencing it. So I'm a continental African, and I spent most of my life living on the continent, which means I have a certain level of privilege, right? I grew up in predominantly Black spaces. Even living in South Africa, I never experienced racism. That was never a thing. It wasn't until I moved to Switzerland. Mind you, this is a whole other country. I don't speak the language. I was 8 years old. On my first day of school, I was the only Black person in my class. The first day of school, somebody says the N-word to me. I don't know what that is. I asked the teacher what that means. She's like, who said that to you? Oh, this kid said it to me. She sat me down. My teacher's white. My teacher sat me down and explained. I don't know why she was explaining this to an 8-year-old, but she explained it to me, and I was still confused because I was 8. I couldn't compute it. So I go back home to my parents and I tell them what happened, and the conversation was just never had. I just grew up in a world that was inherently racist, and I had to learn with the experiences. So I'm one of those kids whose parents never said anything about it.
The conversation is never it never starts off about slavery. And that's what I want everybody on the opposite end to understand, that the conversations that we have to have with our children about it, it never just starts off with slavery. It starts off with some sort of microaggression, some sort of racism that they have experienced or we have experienced as a child, where we have to explain the origins of the racism. So it's not we just have a conversation about slavery. They have to experience a current effect of racism for us to start the conversation. And I think that's the most important part that we want y'all to realize. We don't live in the past of slavery. But we have to help our children understand, here is why you're being treated by that, the historical context of it. And it goes on and piece by piece by piece. This is when you start the conversation, is when that happens to them. And it's sad because all of our children at some point, even myself, at some point have experienced or will experience. And if you're African American, and I mean African American, you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations in, you've in some sort of way experienced covert or overt racism. We wouldn't have to have these conversations if people were honest about the fact that the societal dehumanizing of Black Americans, and not even just in the U.S., globally, is because of the chattel slavery. And this is why we have these conversations. And it's sad that we have to start off like this, but for the most part, this is how we have to explain what's going on.
As you've seen in the video, that was a white man who came to the internet as usual to ask and, get some clearance or some answers on how we Black people, African people talk about slavery to our young generation in particular. And you've heard what the people had to say, but I'm going to speak on the perspective of being an African. First of all, in Uganda, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. To me, the celebration that I grew up seeing was Christmas. And so that's really what I know. And then when it comes to this topic on how we learn about slavery, guys, I always tell you here, the only time that I understood a little bit or even learned a little bit about slavery was about me being in school, and it was just like a little bit of sprinkle, because it's not really taught in a way of really seeing the horrible, tremendous things that the colonizers impacted on our people in the African continent. It's more like, oh, they came, slavery happened, people were enslaved, and yeah, they were taken through the Indian Ocean slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and it's like a sprinkle of what happened, and not in big details of how people were really treated. And that's where I think a lot of us Africans disconnect with the, let's say, African American people or the Caribbean people or just the Black people, the descendants that were taken from the continent, that we have a different experience. And because we have an education that was set up for us to not really go in details of what slavery was about. And if I'm to be really honest, as a Ugandan, I've never had that conversation before with any of my family people. The only thing that I remember, or the only thing that, let me say, my mother usually talks about is the things that she went through in the times of war when the current president that we have today was coming in power, where there was a lot of misplacement, and also how they were skipping dead bodies on the roads, and how they were scared to go to school because these soldiers would come and take them over or kidnap them or marry them. So that is the thing that I usually heard from my mom. But when it comes to slavery, no one ever said anything to me. The conversation just never happened. Now I'm kind of thinking maybe I should try to ask my mom about it, what she thinks about it, how or what knowledge does she have about it. Because really the most thing that a lot of people in my country, Uganda, I would say are mostly traumatized with is the times of when presidents or late presidents or current presidents or leaders were coming into power because they came through war. And so the generation of my mom specifically, they experienced that when they were young, around the age of 15, 16, 17. So it's more of the thing that they mostly talk about than the slavery part. And it's just a disconnect now that you think about it. We have more hate of the leaders that came into power in those sense of war than the actual colonization that truly happened on the continent in Uganda. And it's like you question yourself, so our grandparents, what did they even go through? And then there's also this thing, I would say, in my culture where people keep their traumas to themselves. I think it's very okay to speak about the things that happened to our ancestors, but not to be stuck in those times. We should not be ashamed of talking about it to the young generation, because it also shows them on how strong we are as people, that we went through those traumatic times, and we were strong enough to chase away the colonizers. Especially in the African continent, we need to be teaching our kids that even though these things happened, we still fought to chase away these people. But they make it also seem like in the education system that we have, that is a colonial education, which I don't understand why we still have it. And I don't want to even blame white people anymore on that issue. But why are we even still studying that they still stopped slavery? Like, we make it seem like they are the ones that started it and then still ended it because they felt some kind of mercy, some kind of empathy. And it disguises, it takes away the fact that the Africans really fought to get the freedom that they have today. It's these things that we really need to start having conversations about. And I'm really happy that this person came out to ask. And also, still the question comes into, how do they as white people tell their kids about slavery? Is it in the sense of we did something bad that we regret, or we did something that we should maintain and keep to stay in power? Because if we don't, we are going to be in the same situation as these people. It should also go to, how do the same white people that started the chattel slavery, like the lady talked about, that slavery happened in all different parts of the world, like that I'll never disagree on. But the chattel slavery of looking at someone's skin color and seeing them as less was started by the whites. And so the question also comes in, like, how do they teach, or how do they come out to tell their children on the topic of slavery? So the question should not just go on one side and just pretend like this side shouldn't be asked the same question. That's why I kind of have a problem. So we can give all the answers that we can give as Black people, as African people, but the thing also comes in is, what are the white people willing to do, and what are they doing to change or to tell their kids on the things that happened in the times of slavery? Are they open? Are they honest when they tell their children on, yes, our ancestors did this to these people, we dehumanized them, we stole their stuff, we took away their rights, we made them feel a certain way, we made them pass through traumatic times? Do they also do the same thing to their children and tell them the truth, or they still gaslight and make it seem like we are still the problem that have been or were, you know, oppressed in the situation? I've had a lot of stories when it comes to wars that were happening between Africans and Africans, Ugandans and Ugandans. Those I've had a lot, but not the colonization sense of oppression. So guys, I hope this gives you some clearance, and for you to understand that we have different experiences, and I think a lot of us as Africans were hid from the truth majority of the time. I think our grandparents, our late grandparents, our parents just passed through a lot that they just tried probably to keep our innocence. And yeah, I don't know if it's okay, if it's bad, but I just try to understand it in that sense, and that's how I actually see it. They did that. They don't talk about that to save us from the pain. And yeah, that's really it. Yeah, guys, let me know what you think about this. If you're African, have you ever had that conversations with your parents, with your people, and how do they come even to you to speak about it, and what brings it about? Guys, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.